All right, welcome back to Sasquatch Off-Road. We're doing some more of the BFRO reports out of County. Um, this one was in 1987, fall, October, October 20th. Let's see. Location details: Cache National Forest, 4 or 5 miles east of Pine View Reservoir and southwest of Monte Cristo Forest. Nearest town is Huntsville, Utah. Nearest road, State Road 39. Observed. This story I'm going to relate happened some 15 and a half years ago. I have never talked to anyone about it, not even my wife, who I've been married to for almost 18 years. She's a very skeptical person and is a hard person to convince of anything. She knows that I believe Bigfoot exists because I have talked to her about Bigfoot before. She's just so skeptical about it that I know she would think I was nuts if I ever told her my story. But after having visited your website many times in the past and seeing the new documentary on the Discovery Channel, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, I now feel like I would like to tell my story. Sasquatch Meets Legend, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science is a book by Dr. Jeff Meldrum. You guys can listen to that. It's a good story, or a good. It goes into a lot of information on the subject. Meldrum talks about it a lot. Okay, now to the story. I was deer hunting in the beautiful Wasatch Mountains about 4.5 to 5 miles east of Pine View Reservoir in Cache National Forest. I arrived at the Magpie Campground around 10 a.m. As far as I could tell, I was the only one at the campground, although the campground goes a lot further east than I was. I parked at the furthest west parking lot, and from there I crossed the bridge that takes you over the South Fork of the Ogden River. After crossing the river, there is a trail that goes east, and it parallels the river. I follow the trail until it branches off. At that point, the trail goes south through a small canyon. The day was so nice, and I was enjoying the sounds and scenery very much. About halfway through the canyon, I made a great effort to stay as quiet as I could because, excuse me, because I didn't want to alert anything to my presence there. The trail up the canyon goes for a ways. I can't remember how far, but then it turns and goes west. Right after it turns, everything opens up a little bit more, and there was a steep slopes on either side. Not long after I made this turn, I heard this noise. It was noise that I'd never heard before, a low, grunting sort of growling type of noise. But it was amazing to me about it was the immense volume of the sound. Dang it. I'm struggling again. Now I lost my spot. Okay. Immense volume of the immense volume of the sound. I could almost feel the volume. I could almost feel the volume. I'm not sure if I can put it into words, but it was something like haroo. The sound was low pitched. The sound was low pitched sound, but it would drop off even lower at the end. I stopped immediately in my tracks and scanned the slope to my right, which is where the sound had come from. The sound continued again, but I couldn't locate the exact spot. I stood there and listened. The noise kept repeating, but I wasn't able to find it. So I continued on up the trail very slowly. The noise was not continuous. There was a pause of maybe a minute or two, then I'd hear the noise again. A moose is the only thing that came to mind as the source of the sound. I didn't really care to have a confrontation with a moose, so I stayed on guard. As I got closer to the sound after going a little further up the trail, I heard the noise again. This time my eyes were able to lock onto the location of the steep slope to my right about 100 feet up, and probably 350 to 400 feet in front of me, there was a growth of thick trees and brush. The noise was coming from that spot. I felt a little better, at least I knew where it was coming from. I was far enough away from it that I thought I could make some noise, maybe it would leave. So I started stepping on branches and kicking small rocks, but it did not leave. I kept going up the trail thinking I would see it soon, but it would not show itself. Finally, I was right beneath it, about 100 feet straight below the thick covered area. I stopped at a tree below the sound and sat there on a thick branch. I was pretty sure that whatever was up there knew I was right down below it. Then the sounds became more agitated. I was trying real hard to see through the thick covered area using my binoculars, but I could not see into it at all. Then, along with the noise, some tree branches in the thick area started shaking. They were shaking about 9 or 10 feet up off the ground. I then thought, okay, here it comes. But it still wouldn't come out. I started to feel a little uneasy. I just knew that I was being watched. And whatever was watching me did not want me there. The noise started to intensify even more. I could not believe the lung capacity this thing had. The noise was immense. Then I really became unnerved when two rocks about the size of basketballs come rolling out of the thick cover down towards me. That's all I needed. I got back up and immediately headed out the way I'd come. I didn't run or anything to cause a disturbance. I just walked out as calmly as I and quickly as I could. I kept checking my back, though, to make sure I was not being followed. I could still hear the noise until I got back around the bend in the trail. As soon as I got around the corner, my anxiety and fears left. I felt all right again. I just knew that whatever I had heard wanted me to leave. I was only too happy to oblige. I have hunted and fished by myself for years and felt very comfortable by myself in those situations, but I've never heard anything at all like what I'd heard that day. I still don't know what it was in the thick area of trees and brush growth, and I'm not sure if you will find this interesting at all. But I have read accounts where Bigfoot would remain hid while being looked at or while it's looking at someone. Well, this was a lot of years ago, and I know that it's nothing that can be checked out now, but maybe it'll help with research. Thank you for your time. Other witnesses? No, I was hunting by myself. Other stories? I've only seen the other reports on your website. Time and conditions? Between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m., mostly sunny, few high clouds, probably 60 to 65 degrees. Environment: pine trees, quaking aspen, scrub brush, grassy. Location was south of Magpie Campground and South Fork of the Ogden River. So Magpie Campground is part of a group of campgrounds along this road just east of Pineview Reservoir up Ogden Canyon. There's multiple campgrounds in that area, and it is just below a main reservoir. So there is a lot of water in that area for these creatures to get to. And this location is not too far away from those locations in the stories that I read last time from Wheeler Canyon. Wheeler Canyon is right before Pineview. So they can, like, they're in the area. These time frames are not too far away from each other. They're probably a decade or so, but it just shows that this could be a habitual site for these creatures. All right, this next story is from North Ogden Divide, which is just on the north end of Pineview. And this is all around the same area where these last stories have been, is around Pineview. So, year 1997, season fall, September 15th. Nearest town is Eden, Liberty. Nearest road, it was on North Ogden Divide. Observed. It happened one night when my brother-in-law and my sister had to take me home from a date because I'd got grounded. We drove my date home over North Ogden Divide and then our way back over the divide into Eden. As we just went over the top, I noticed that there was no cars in the parking lot. It was 12:30 a.m. and dark. As we went another 100 to 200 yards down the valley side, we noticed a person crossing the road. But as we got but as we got closer, we could tell it was not a person, but it was a 7 to 8 foot tall and hairy. By the time we were to pass it, my brother-in-law rolled down the window and yelled, "Get out of the road." My sister asked, "What do you think that was?" My brother-in-law said, "It was probably some kid dressed in a gorilla suit." But as we thought about it, it did not make sense because there was no cars, there was nowhere to park other than the top. And and after we yelled at it, it just walked into the mountains. I know that I saw something that was about 8 feet tall, very dark and hairy. My only conclusion was it was Bigfoot. Other witnesses? Yes, me, my brother-in-law, and my sister. Other stories? Yes, I have a friend who told me about how they found half-eaten fish and some hair samples at a trout farm in North Ogden. Time and conditions, 12:30 a.m. It was just a dark, starry night in the fall. It walked across the road, and the road is steep. The road is a very steep road in that area, and both sides is steep. So they're heading east, and on the north side of the road, it is almost straight up and down, and then on the other side, it is a drop off. Uh, and the trout farm they're referring to is in North Ogden, and there's been encounters there. One of the caretakers came in the morning to find a Bigfoot eating fish out of the pond, and they were actually able to get plaster casts made of that creature in that location. Um, so these areas, this whole area, these last encounters have been talked about. They're not too far away from each other. They don't give a very good description of the creature, but I'm willing to bet that it's probably the same family pod or the same creature that is being seen in these areas. So I will try and do one more story and fit it into this. All right, this next story is 1998 fall, August, Weber County. So this location is actually Cache County, not Weber County. Um, Location details. It says it's Weber County, but the location is actual Cache County. I was in the woods of Monte Cristo Forest. The site was about 2 to 3 miles off the main road at Six Bit Springs. And I know this area very well. Six Bit Springs off the main road is about 10 miles in. So 2 to 3 miles off that road down Curtis Creek Road, you're still on private property. So at Six Bit Springs, you're about 10 miles in, close to 10 miles. And that's straight line distance. On the road, it's a little further, mileage wise. Um, to get to Six Bit Springs, you need to take Curtis Creek Road and follow the signs. The road to the springs is a 4-wheel drive trail. At that time, it was pretty bad road, but now you can take a Civic down that road. Nearest town, Eden, Utah. There are smaller towns near, but I don't know the names. Monte Cristo, main road, don't know exact number. Observed. The sighting happened during bow hunting season in Utah. I like to hunt the area because of relative isolation and the numerous deer. I'd been hiking around the area of what is known as Six Bit Springs. I did start out in a general direction, but wove around so much that I did not really know where I was. It would be hard for me to pinpoint on a map. The first strange thing I noticed was the absence of large game. It is usually a game highway in that part of the woods. As I was wandering, getting totally lost, I noticed a reek smell and decided to scout out the source. I was curious if a hunter had lost or shot deer or elk during the hunt and wanted to see what it was. I would catch whiffs of the smell here and there that led me to a sort of clearing. The area looked like a dried out pond. The grass was greener in the area, and compared to the woods, the only area that had bright sunlight. I scanned the general area, and nothing really caught my eye except for what I thought was a large tree stump almost in the middle of the pond, about 25 to 35 yards from where I was standing in the trees. As I walked back up the slope, the smell hit me again, and it was coming from that pond area. I looked at it again and stared at what I thought was a tree stump. It was black, like it had been burned by lightning or fire. The shape was odd. It was roughly pear-shaped and contoured, no jagged edges like broken pieces of wood. It looked like a large person wrapped in a dark shawl sitting with their back to you. In this sitting position, it might have been about 4 feet tall. As I stared at it, I decided it was only a burned tree stump and that had weathered smooth edges. But as I watched, it listed to one side. It was then I thought it might be a black cow or a moose laying with its back to me. As I watched, it would shift back and forth like someone getting comfortable in their seat. I also noticed the grass in front of this thing moving as though it was being disturbed. It seemed to be very intent on what it was doing. I became scared at this point and hurried back up the slope. After many wrong turns here and there, I made my way back to camp about 4 to 4:30 p.m. The only other strange thing that happened was there was a large dog we always took camping and hunting, was very jumpy and nervous, and would run off into the wooded areas by our camp for no apparent reason, and would stare at and fixate into the woods for a very long periods of time. The reason I mention this was the same dog has been on these trips numerous times and has never acted this way. Needless to say, we left at the crack of dawn the next morning, and I have not been back to that site since then. I don't know if this story is worth keeping, but I could not guarantee that it was not a cow or moose, although being familiar with cows and seeing moose often. I strongly doubt that it is either one of these. Also noticed, none except for the way the dog was acting. Other witnesses, none. Other stories, I've heard Bigfoot stories in the Monte Cristo area, but not anywhere this spot. Monte Cristo is pretty large. Time and conditions, the sighting was about 1:30 in the afternoon, sunny, clear condition. Environment, the place the sighting occurred was in a depression in the middle of a large pines. The area looked as though it might have been a pond in the springtime, but had dried out. The size of the depression was about 40 yards by 120 yards wide. So this area is in the same area that I had my very first encounter. Uh, there's a lot of things. I go up in this area quite often to do uh, to do research. There's a lot of things that happen in this area, and not just Bigfoot related. I've heard stories of people seeing orbs and stuff in this area. So it's a very odd area. I really enjoy this area and going into this area doing research. I still camp and hunt in that area to this day. I've been in that area quite often. We're almost done with Weber County, the Weber County sightings. So if you guys have any other counties you guys want me to start with, go ahead and start listing them. Let me know and let me know what you guys think of these stories. And remember, you can't find them from the couch.